Hey guys, I'm Andrew Davidson and welcome back to another As Per My Ability video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the narrative dice system that is allocated within the Star Wars role-playing game by Fantasy Flight Games. Now, there are a billion videos on YouTube about the narrative dice system in Star Wars. I watched all of them. I kind of took the things that I liked from those videos and kind of invented some things of my own. And so I'm going to do a video on the narrative dice system. I will give you a little bit of an overview of what Star Wars the role-playing game is, in case you don't know. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview, but mostly we're going to be talking about dice. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're talking about role-playing games and Star Wars. Like I said at the top of the video, this particular video is going to be about the narrative dice system within the Star Wars role-playing game published by Fantasy Flight Games. Now, it was originally first published in 2015 by FFG, and it plays very akin to a lot of role-playing games out there, such as Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons. But there's one key element that I think is absolutely gangbusters within this system, and that is the narrative dice. Before we get too far into the dice aspect, which, like I said, what this video is really going to be about, I want to give you just a very brief overview of the Star Wars game. This is just going to tell you what is out there. This is not a video about the game. I would probably have a 10-hour long video if I had to describe an entire role-playing game, from character creation to space combat to experience points to leveling up to how weapons work, and obviously how do the dice work, which is one of the many things that you're going to have to learn about to play Star Wars the role-playing game. And I hope you do, because it's hella cool. Fantasy Flight Games came out with 3 modules for Star Wars. Actually, there's a 4th one called The Force Awakens, which I'm not even going to talk about. I'm not even going to show it off in this video, but there were 3 core modules for playing the role-playing game, the Star Wars role-playing game. Now, for those of you that don't know role-playing games, I really have to apologize. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty. There's a DM, and then there's your players. There's dice rolling, and it's kind of played in the collective imagination of the players at the table. That's about all I'm going to say about role-playing games, because I really want this video to just jump into talking about the dice, the narrative dice system, which I think is really cool. But I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the 3 different modules where you can come up with stories, where you can come up with stories within the giant Star Wars universe. So, the first one that came out is The Edge of the Empire. This is the core rule book. This is all that you really need. And I should preface at this point that I'm going to be showing off all 3 books, and you really only need essentially 1. You can pick up all 3 if you want to jumble about a bunch of different stories, but you really only need 1 core book, because the only difference is probably about 30 pages. That's about the only differences between the 3 books I'm about to tell you. But Edge of the Empire is basically if you want to do a story that's kind of outer rim, on the outskirts of the Star Wars world, bounty hunters and smugglers and just kind of Han Solo type nitty-gritty characters. Here's where you're going to find all of your speeders and your freight and your cargo and your different character classes for the Edge of the Empire sort of, I call them modules, because it's just what kind of a story do you want to tell? And so that is if you want to create a story that is more about less about like the fight of good and evil and more about just kind of playing some scum and villainy characters. Speaking of good and evil, the next one is called Age of Rebellion. And again, I'm repeating myself. All three of these books are pretty much all the same except for just a little bit. They add a little bit because of the different theme. In Age of Rebellion, you're going to be focusing on stories that deal with the exact clash between the Empire and the Rebellion. So if you have a story, if you're a storyteller, or you want to be a GM and you have a Star Wars story about something that's more just directly related to the struggle between the good guys and the bad guys, this is the book for you, this red one. And it'll take you through, they all take you through character creation, and they give you some different character, like careers, classes, depending on which book that you get. This one will help you if, again, you want to do more of a good guys just versus bad guys. The big galactic rebellion war and X-Wings and TIE fighters and things like that. I've saved the best for last because it's just my personal favorite. And of course, you had to bring the Force into it. So Force and Destiny is where you basically are going to be playing Jedis or Force users or, just Jedi Knights. You start your character off as a level 1 Force user or maybe a Force adept person, and you can level them up, accordingly. But this will deal with like the Sith, will deal with the Jedi Council, and again, all three of these books have a lot of the same information as far as creating things. There's just a little bit of tweaks, a little bit of differences as far as the weapons and the ships and the character classes. They call them careers in this book, but I'll speak in a little bit of D&D code. So you have your career or your character class. So yeah, you have your career as a Jedi. You get to have lightsabers, you get to have Force powers. That is those are the three books. Like I said, there's a Force Awakens one that's really not worth your time. Any one of these books is enough for you and your friends to play. You just have to kind of think about what kind of a story you want to have. What type of Star Wars story do you want? Do you want one that's like smugglers and bounty hunters? Do you want one that's more about the Empire and the Rebellion and that whole big galactic struggle that's happening in the world? Or do you want something that can interject some Jedis, some personal Jedi quests, and you can jump all around in the Star Wars timeline to tell your stories? And so those are the three. That's an overview of just the stuff that you can get or what you should get. I'm not going to go into, like I said, it'd be about a 10-hour video. What we're going to talk about, I'm going to cut away and I'm going to talk about the dice system. They use what they call a narrative dice system. These are custom dice that you'll see in a moment, in which each player will roll a whole bunch of dice on their own. So unlike D&D, where the dungeon master will have like a screen or a shield, and he or she will roll stuff, secretively, and then the players will roll their stuff or whatever. Here, the player rolls all the good dice and the bad dice all together, and they all have different symbols. They all mean different things. It's kind of a mess in your head when I first looked at it, but we're going to see if we can wade through it. I'll talk you through it. So let me show you what the narrative dice system is and what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's a chart that is located on the back of one of the starter books that you can buy. You can buy some adventures that are pre-made, but I just want to show you the back so that you can see all of the dice. You have your ability die, your proficiency, your difficulty, your challenge, your boost, your setback, and your force die. Wow, so this is a lot going on. There's also some other charts and stuff that I will kind of talk about, and some symbols. So I like to use the back side of these things and kind of hand them out to my players for a good reference. So I have the dice set up here. So, as we'll check the guide over here, every die that is good, let's remove this for a moment. Every die that is good is located on this column. Every one that is like a negative die is located over here on this column. Now I've arranged them so that each one typically cancels out the other, as you can tell by the sides, like your D8s, your D20s, and your D6s. So let's start with the ability die are over here. And these, like I said, over here, these are all good dice that you want to roll. You want to get successes. So a success is basically like that right there, like an explosion, sun blast thing. But there's also, let me show it here, these Jedi symbols. They look like Jedi symbols. They're called advantage. There's a big one right there. So there's also advantage. So there's really two things that you're trying to win at. You're trying to win at successes, and you're trying to win at advantage as far as rolling symbols. And so these are your ability dice. This is the proficiency dice, which means that you're proficient in something, and I'll get into that in a second. And these are good, like boost dice. These are good dice that you want to have. Like I said, over here are all the nasty dice. So these are the difficulty die. And so there's, depending on your difficulty, there's these that will cancel out the symbols on those. This is basically a really nasty challenge die. Now you don't see the challenge die a whole lot unless if there's like something super massive, difficult going on in the scene. Sometimes you'll come across like a big boss fight, and maybe the boss will roll some challenge die, but you don't necessarily see this too often, I don't think. And then these are the setback dice, and these will kind of cancel out, these things. Now, in order for anything that you want to do to be a success, you have to, by the end of your rolling and canceling everything out, you have to have at least one success. If you have 0, that's a fail. But you have to have at least one. If you roll like 8 of these, but they get canceled out by other effects, and you have 1 left over, then you're good. You also want to take a stock of advantages, because advantages will allow you to what they call fail forward, fail backwards, succeed forward, or succeed backwards. And I'll kind of explain what that means, hopefully proficient enough as I go along. So anyone that's familiar with a Dungeons and Dragons or a character sheet usually have your attributes such as dexterity or brawn or agility. So let's say I have an agility of 3. So if I were to do an agility roll, then I would roll 3 of these. But let's say I'm doing something specific within the agility attribute. Let's say I'm doing a skill such as sneak, which is part of agility. And let's say, I know lots of hypotheticals, let's say I've put ranks into this for sneak only. Now if I was just doing an agility, like say I wanted to jump up on a table, well then I would roll just basically this. Just roll that and hope that I get at least a success. Like if I've used experience points and I've upgraded to like something specific like sneak, I can put ranks. So let's say I put 1 rank into sneak. So now I'm not sneaking on top of a table, but I might want to sneak by someone that's standing next to the door. So instead, I take one of these and I replace it with a proficiency. Now, proficiency die is just basically a lot more of the good stuff. And it's a D20, but there's lots, you see doubles and whatnot. So now I get to roll this instead of this, because when it comes to sneaking, guess what? I'm a little better at sneaking. Let's say I put 2 ranks into sneak, I can go like that. I have 2 ranks into sneak. But if I was not sneaking and I was using just my basic agility, then it would just be just be that, just your base number. So again, if you go back to D&D, it goes back to your main attributes and then your skills where you can put ranks. When you rank, you basically get to upgrade into the proficiency dice, which are awesome. Now on the other side, there are the difficulty dice. So let's go back to me jumping up on that table. I'm gonna roll 3 to jump up on that table. I'm pretty good at just agility, but it's not a sneak roll. I'm not sneaking, I'm just gonna try to jump up on a table. Well, here is the challenge, the difficulty dice. And so it'll tell me the difficulty. Now, I actually don't have all my dice out for this video, but you can add more. So the dungeon master or game master might say something like, oh, it's a pretty standard table. It's not very tall. It's not like a big deal. It's 1 difficulty. And as we go back to our chart here, you can see, 1 purple is easy, average, hard, daunting, and formidable. I have enough dice to do all that, but I only brought out just a few purples. So now I'm doing an easy task, and then I would roll. Let's say the table that I wanted was located up on like a tier above me. So that means I had to jump more than the table, but I had to jump up onto the tier and onto the table. Maybe that's a little harder of a jump. Or maybe it's a really, 3 is a hard skill to do. The DM will decide and give the players these dice and say, hey, add this into your roll. For whatever reason. Because these tell kind of a story. Oh, it's a pretty easy jump. So let's come up with a scenario and let's use the sneak idea. So let's say that I'm a part of the rebel resistance and I'm trying to sneak into a Imperial something or another base. So I'm trying to sneak past a guard. So again, remember my sneak, I had 2, well I had 3, but I did upgrade because I put a rank in there. Now, they might say, okay, the stormtrooper you're trying to sneak past is, not like paying very much attention. So it's pretty easy. He's not, so we'll add that into your pool. But it's also the middle of the day. So that's going to make it even more difficult because it's the middle of the day. And so that is what's called a setback die. That's basically any type of a conditional thing that'll make my check harder. Because it's the middle of the day, he adds in one of these nasty dice or die. He could add another one or more. He could say it's a really nice day and it's an open field. There's like literally nothing for you to hide, to sneak by, to use to sneak. And then I would basically roll and see what happens. Now let's see a different kind of idea. Let's say that I'm trying to sneak past the guard, but the alarm has been raised or something. So now the stormtrooper, he's not going to be a 1. He's not going to just be kind of doodling around. He's on high alert. And so maybe there'll be a second one or a third one because he knows. So it's going to be a lot more difficult to sneak past someone who knows that someone's trying to sneak past you rather than someone now just, la-di-da. And so that's how the difficulty dice work. But what if what if just perchance it's at night? And so I could say, and they usually say, try to have the players to recommend the positive conditions. What if I'm saying, well, you say it's dark out, so how about a setback? How about a boost die because it's dark out? So this will give me a bonus. And what if it was raining? Yeah, what if it's in the middle of a rainstorm? That'd give me another bonus. And then, but there's also a giant fence you have to climb that's like right by him. That's going to make this either, I don't know, it's the DM's choice. He could make it more difficult because of the chain link fence, or maybe you could make some noise from the fence, and so he would add in some setbacks, some conditionals, and so that's kind of how the dice work. Now let's talk about after you roll. So once you roll things, so here, let's clear some of this out. So I'm rolling past, I'm trying to sneak past sneak. I got 1 rank in sneak. There. So I'm trying to sneak past a stormtrooper who's on high alert, which makes this very difficult because he's going to be, he's really alert that I'm coming. So then I would roll these and I would examine what they are. So these here, this is threat. This cancels out any advantages. So I have one threat, one advantage. Guess what? They don't say it in the book, but for me, I like to just tell players to just remove it. Okay? They cancel each other out. This is a blank. I rolled a blank. So obviously cancel that out. This is another threat to cancel out an advantage. There is an advantage here. And so that could cancel out that advantage. Remove them. And this is a blank. And so remove that. What am I left with? Well, like I said before, I need at least one success to win at my little challenge, my little sneak. So I fail. And so because I failed, something will happen. I don't have any successes at all. I don't have any of those blasts like that. I have 2 advantage. Whoops. And I have 2, and these little squared or diamond things, they cancel out successes. So I have 0 successes, but I do have some advantage. I have 2 advantage to their 0 advantage. So I do fail, unfortunately, but I do have an advantage. So I could fail by not sneaking past the guard. He does notice me, but something good will happen from that. So when he notices me, he comes running off to find me, which opens up the door for the rest of my buddies to all go running in because he abandons his post or something. So you see what I mean there? It's like something bad happens, but it changes the story because something kind of good happens. So I'll say it again. You can succeed at a cost. You can succeed and then at a super success, which I'll talk about in a minute. You can fail, but still kind of fail forward, like I just talked about. I failed my sneak attack, but something good happened from it. Or you can super fail, like you can fail, and also that would be basically this thing. And so not only do you fail, but something really bad happens. So not only do I not sneak past the stormtrooper, but maybe I trip on the fence that I tried to climb over, and now my leg is stuck in the fence and I'm hanging upside down from the fence, making a whole crap ton of noise that the stormtrooper is going to come over and obviously he's going to kill me. And so that's one of those ideas of like you fail and then something bad happens, as opposed to you failed, but there's also something good that could happen. And so the 2 things I want to talk about last, well, we'll also talk about force. This is called a triumph. This is a success because it does have the little blast icon in it, but it's also a triumph, and it can't be canceled out by anything other than, oh, did I just see it? Like the super, yeah, might have to edit some of this. This is the only thing that can cancel this. So this is like a super fail right here. And a triumph is a super triumph. So even if you fail, you can spend your triumphs to do stuff. So here we have the book with the triumph symbols that count as a success. And then the despair symbols counts as a failure. But you can also use them to do really nasty things or really positive things. One thing that I like to do, especially with the triumph, obviously not the despair, is if they roll a triumph, I'll ask my player, how do you want to spend your triumph? So if you succeed with a triumph, that means that maybe I'll allow you to make an extra move, because you had a triumph. So not only do you run up to a stormtrooper and slash with your lightsaber through the first one, but I give you an additional attack. So you get like boom, and then you move to the next one and you do like a double attack because you had a triumph. A lot of the times I like to leave this up to the players to kind of, keep it within reason. Nobody should be like sprouting wings and flying and breathing fire, but, keep it within reason and ask kind of how would you like to do your triumph. You can also do triumphs on critical injuries, on not necessarily like just run-of-the-mill people, at least I wouldn't do it that way, but maybe bosses, or like people that are important in the story, you could give them a critical injury with your triumph. With the despair, it's the exact same thing, except it's just all the nastiness, and the DM will take care of it and say, like I said, not only did you fall from the fence, but your leg got caught in the fence, and now you're dealing damage, you're suffering damage because your leg is being torn or twisted in this fence, or something like that. So basically, the despair is like something super bad happens. So you got to think of winning and losing on a scale, on kind of a sliding scale, which is one of the things I never really cared for D&D back in the day, because it was always like, I need a 13 to hit. I'm like, okay, well, I rolled a 14, so I hit, and it's like, okay, good. All right, so I rolled a 10, so I don't hit, and it just felt so dry. Whereas here, you always have the chance of rolling a lot of just different dice, different things. There's different combinations. You have your environment. You have your setbacks from environments and stuff. It's really dynamic system, and it's very narrative driven, because depending on what happens, that's going to be what drives your narrative forward. And so these are all the dice. It's kind of hard to figure out, especially once you start leveling up and you start rolling a bunch, so like start rolling, stuff like this. I would just start to say, like, start removing things that cancel things out. Here's a success, here's a success. This gets rid of one success, and also, we'll do this, one success and also one of these. This also gets rid of one, and so I have one success. Just try to do it eliminating, by kind of eliminating like that. They don't really say that in the book, at least not that I know of, but it's better to just kind of, for your eyesight purposes, to kind of show what's left over once you start removing everything. So the last one that I'm going to talk about very briefly is the force die, and if you're a force user, you'll roll a force die and generate either light side force points or dark side force points. You can use those force points to activate force abilities, which I'm not going to get into because that will get into the whole rest of the game. If you're a light side character and you want to roll this and you have 2 force points and you want to use them on a force ability, like maybe a lightsaber throw, and then have it come back to you, or a force push or something, you can spend these to do that. If you roll dark side and you're like, I'm not a dark side player, but I still want to use these force points, well, then you have to basically do something that will cause a conflict, because you're using some dark side points you're drawing upon the dark side to do your special powers. And conflicts is, again, something that is a whole chapter in the books that I already showed you. So not going to get into those, but at least you know what that guy is. That's the force die. So that's everything for the narrative dice aspect for the Star Wars role-playing game. Let's get back to my thoughts and we can sign off. So there you have it, the narrative dice system in Star Wars. It's really quite cool. Now, as you saw in the video, it's a lot. It's a mess at first. It's kind of hard for your eyes to figure out, but it is one of the main driving mechanisms that turns this role-playing game or role-playing system into a very immersive experience. One thing that I really, well, one of many things. One thing I just really fell apart with Dungeons and Dragons is it didn't seem quite as narrative based. Now, obviously, there's your quest and you have your overarching kind of story. But one thing I just didn't like is that everything wasn't kind of narrated the way that the dice kind of went. If you roll 13, I know I need a 13 to kill the goblin, and I rolled a 14. Oh, the goblin's dead. Okay, you slash the goblin, he's dead. Well, here you can get a little bit more creative, and like I said in the video, you can hand off some of the narrative ideas to your players and have them say, you know what, I want my player, or I want my character to do this or that. If they have a triumph, like I mentioned in the video. That's really cool. I really like the fact that it's like passing off the story. You have a triumph. How do you want to triumph at this thing? Or if there's a despair, me as the DM, maybe I will take over and say, this is really bad. Your gun overloaded or something and it blew up in your face and caused you damage, you're going to have things like that, so that every little thing in the game kind of becomes part of the story. And really how you roll and what you roll and how you interpret those rolls will drive your story, or at least your scenarios, in certain directions. So that is all that I have today. Just the one aspect, the Star Wars narrative dice element in the Fantasy Flight Star Wars role-playing game. If you're not familiar, my name is Andrew Davidson. This is as per my ability. If you like our content, if you like our videos, if you like board games in general, do us a favor and do all the fun YouTube stuff, comment, like, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications when we post new videos. We try to post videos every Tuesday. So that's where I'm going to leave us. Again, I'm Andrew Davidson. You've been watching As Per My Ability, and I will see each and every one of you at the next video.